Hello once again and welcome to another topic under Practical Research 2. And this time we will be talking about research ethics. Now we will be dealing with a lot of human subjects as our research participants, and so we have to be mindful of how we treat them before, during, and after our data gathering. Actually, the history of human subjects protection can be traced back to the Nazi medical war during the World War II, where concentration camp prisoners were abused, for lack of a better term, in the name of science and research. What do I mean by the word abused? So these prisoners were actually injected with gasoline. They were injected with live viruses, poisons. They were forced to sit on ice, water, or extreme temperature, just so the Nazi medical practitioners then would know how the body would respond to different temperatures or extreme temperatures. There were also forced sterilization. They were deprived of food and water. They even dissected their brains, burned them with bomb material, those kinds of things. So yeah, it is only the lack of a better term that I used the word abused. Okay, so that is the quick background of why there had been many people who strived for the protection of human subjects in medical research. Hence, the birth of the Nuremberg Code of 1946. This one has the first set of principles outlining professional ethics for medical researchers. Okay, and it actually forms the basis for today's research ethics and codes. So the highlight of this Nuremberg Code of 1946 is actually the requirement of a voluntary consent. Now, there's also this BELMONT report of 1979. How is it different from the Nuremberg Code of 1946? Well, BELMONT report is actually the document which serves as the cornerstone of ethical principles upon which federal requirements or federal regulations for the protection of human research participants are based. Hence, this document embodies non-maleficence, beneficence, and justice. And these are the 3 out of the 4 cornerstones or the principles of research ethics. So let's see if you have gotten the correct answers in the You Judge activities. I will be citing real scenarios, research scenarios. These actually happened in the past. And so let's see if you understood well what is ethical versus unethical research. On to our first, let's see. Okay, if you actually recognize this one. On to our first situation. Researchers from the U.S. Public Health Services in Tuskegee studied over 400 black men with syphilis and 200 without syphilis. This happened in 1972. In 1940, penicillin had been established as an effective medicine for syphilis. Since the human subjects needed to be observed, they were not informed about the treatment nor were given penicillin. So, do you think it's ethical or not? Of course. This is the most famous violation of all. Not only because these black men were actually recruited with no informed consent, but they were also misinformed about the procedures to be done on them. Well, that is actually a backstory, but infecting or not really infecting, but those participants who already had the disease were not informed that they could actually be treated. Now, that withdrawal from information is in itself unethical. So, if you guessed it right, so it's unethical. Next one. In 1963, studies were conducted at New York's Jewish Chronic Disease Hospital to understand whether the body's inability to reject cancer cells was due to cancer or rehabilitation. To test this, they injected live cancer cells into patients. However, consent was actually given to the participants. It did not tell that cancer cells were to be injected to them because the researchers, okay, this one is a noble excuse, I guess, did not want to unnecessarily frighten them. So the question is this ethical or not? Ethical in what sense? They were given the consent. Okay, they were given the consent. So what do you think? Of course, this is actually unethical. Even though they were given the consent, still, the researchers misinformed them about the procedure, about injecting live cancer cells. And who would want that, right? Instead of injecting live cancer cells, why didn't the researchers instead involve, say, actual cancer patients? Okay, this actually breaks the rule, or broke the rule of the ultimate rule: do not harm or do no harm. That is the non-maleficence principle in research. So even though it's a noble excuse that, oh, we do not want to frighten our research participants, still it's harmful to inject live cancer cells. So this one is also deemed as unethical. Up next, from 1963 to 1966, mind you, that's 3 years, at the Willowbrook State School in New York, an institution for mentally defective children, researchers wanted to study the natural history of infectious hepatitis, and newly admitted children were deliberately infected with the hepatitis virus. Just like earlier, okay? The children's parents, however, gave consent to this. Now, the last statement actually make this one ethical. Okay, unethical still because children are part of the vulnerable population, which we'll be talking about later. They cannot speak for themselves, and even though their guardian managed to provide consent, still, okay, the part where the researchers had to inject the actual hepatitis virus still breaks the very principle of non-maleficence, or the do no harm principle. Okay, just like what I've told you earlier, they could have just involved actual hepatitis patients, okay, and even though they would want to have they would want to examine the natural progression of the disease, I mean from toddler or from this age up to what age, still it broke the rule of non-maleficence. So this actually constitutes the first part of the unlocking of the correct answers for your You Judge activity. Stay tuned for the second part. Thank you.